Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation where we cover all things ambient AI, which is our second theme of our Learning and Earning report. If you haven't been able to check that out yet, I would highly recommend downloading it. But we're today going to discuss how AI today is really becoming an invisible layer that surrounds us. Every click, every conversation, how we move online, learn and create, AI is able to increasingly take that as inputs, which is a massive opportunity in that I think it really changes how education operates and these interesting inputs for tracking learning to become more personalized, more responsive, and more continuous. But as we've discussed, there are a lot of big questions about what this means for privacy, agency, and what it means to be human in environments where AI systems are able to observe and remember and even proactively anticipate how we'll act. So today I'm joined by three other amazing panelists, including Jennifer from my team, who was my co-author on the Learning and Earning report and is also on the GSV investment team. Muktha Ananda, who's the director of engineering at Google. He leads Learn at LUM, oversaw the Gemini app learning, and his work currently powers a lot of experiences across search, YouTube, classroom, and more. And then finally, we have Robert Wong, who is Director of Product Management for Learning and Education. And he's built AI features inside Google's core products from search to Gemini. And now he works alongside DeepMind and research to integrate all of those learning science principles into Google's applications. So between the work of embedding learning science principles into the model layer and to what they're putting out on the learning experience application layer, I think we have a pretty good group to discuss what ambient AI really means. And if you haven't already checked it out, we have a comment section where you can input any of your questions. We'll have about 15 minutes at the end allocated for open Q&A. So please be sure to add them as you're staying tuned into the first part of this conversation. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Muktha, for joining us. Been big fans of everything that you all have been putting out from the Google sphere. And to kick us off, I wanted to really go back to this idea of AI as air. As you know, we've had, I'm sure you all have been thinking a lot about, we internally have had a lot of discussions around how ed tech today has been very reactive. It's just been these static checkpoints in how you collect information around a person's learning journey. And now we have a system that can observe continuously. So when we say AI is everywhere and this concept of ambient AI, what does that mean for you? And how is it different from just integrating AI or assistive AI?
I can take a first take at that. I mean, I think you're right. AI is making it a lot easier to observe and take that information and make it useful. When I think about ambient AI as an input, well, one, there's like your activity within an app and how you interact with it, what you do. But then it starts to level up from that. So it's like now you start seeing AI in browsers and tracking your activity across multiple applications. Then it can go up to the OS level outside of the browser and look at all of your activity. And eventually you can get to the point where it's using all the sensors in your computer, in your phone, in your watch, or your glasses to collect a lot of information. So, I mean, I think the scope of what can be collected is massively increasing. And then also with AI, what you can do with it is also increasing a lot too. The other thing about, the other part of, we talked about inputs, the other half of ambient or AI as air that I also think about is also outputs. Like there's a lot of interesting ways that AI is also increasing the number of outputs that you have, and the combination of both those, you know, all these inputs and new outputs. So, you know, obviously there's text, but people are using voice more, they're using video more, and there's also pointers and glasses and display and overlays. And so I think the combination of those two really make AI ambient across the board.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Rob said. Making a finer distinction between digital and physical, right? On the one hand, ambient AI could be wherever you are present digitally, and that's kind of already happening. But I think the new frontier is to bridge the physical and the digital. And wherever you are in the real world, for example, language immersion. What if a AI can listen to you while you are walking on the road, talking to people, understand what you're saying, and then understand what to teach you later? So the bridging the physical and the digital is a very important part of what Ambient AI can do, and we can discuss that more later.
Definitely. I guess I'm curious, just given the broader AI timeline, you all have been working very closely with this technology for a very long time and seen its evolution, but I'm curious what you see as driving this shift right now. Is it kind of this rise of these continuous multimodal systems? Is it the introduction of memory that follows a user? I'm curious why now is, we're finally unlocking multimodal ambient AI.
I mean, I think part of it is just where the technology is today. It's becoming much, much more powerful and both multimodal input and increasingly multimodal output with some of the launches that you're seeing with VO and Sora and so forth. One of the ways that we think about our roadmap internally at Google is in 3 evolutions. And so the first one was around moving from never giving just an answer to providing engaging explanations. And you see that in a lot of our work on search with AI overviews or with Gemini and so forth. The second evolution that we've been working on is moving from passive learning to more engaged learning, right? Like, don't just watch a video or read something, like engage with, engaged learner and active learning, where a lot of that productive struggle happens. And so we have things like guided learning and quizzes and flashcards that we've launched recently. The third frontier is where we are now, which is, moving from, transactional interactions to a much more stateful and a much more personalized world. And that is where I would say we haven't quite launched a lot of features that lead into that. But like you said, we're now at the point where technology, sensors, and other things are getting to the point where you can start doing that. And we're super excited about what's coming ahead. But yeah, I think it's kind of a point in time of where the technology is maturing to.
Yeah, to add to that, it's the point where the need meets the technology, meets feasibility of building this at scale. I think as we move forward, the feasibility technology would improve, cost of deploying it reduces, and then scale of processing increases. And so you would see a progression along the way. And I don't think we are there where ambient AI is prevalent, but it's at a very early point, right? So, and we can talk again, like Rob talked about sensors. I think it's all about the different layers of technology and where they are as far as in their maturity is concerned. Like, there is sensory layer, then there is a context layer, then there is this intelligent layer, which is the AI itself, and then there is a memory layer. Each of these technologies is at a different point in its game. And so depending on where we are, we can go more into the details if you want. Depending on where they are, it will either go fast or slow towards fully ambient AI.
Muktha and Rob, I'm curious, as you think about kind of progressing through these various different stages and kind of reaching this third and final stage, how much of it do you think is around technical limitations today, right? Like you're saying, kind of some of combining all these different layers, understanding them, utilizing the data, actually collecting all the data, and how much of it do you think is around the user journey itself and really understanding how to apply these technologies in a kind of useful experience?
Maybe I can address the technical part of it first, and then maybe Rob can
sure.
talk a little bit about other things. I feel that let's go back to the 4 layers, right? Well, where do the sensors exist today for us to collect information about users? And like I said, digitally, we are doing, in some sense, we have some digital connection points. So when people go to browsers, when they are entering stuff into search or ChatGPT or these AI chatbots, there is some information, like go to YouTube, they watch videos. So there are multiple digital touch points, but are these connected together, right? So now privacy and becomes a huge issue. Trust becomes a huge issue. So I don't think, even if technology maturity is there, if the trust doesn't grow along with it, I don't think we can move forward in a meaningful way. And even there, the sensory network, if you want to move from digital to physical, okay, you have a watch. Maybe glasses are coming in the future, but they're not here yet. The glasses are not there yet. So you don't have that maturity of technology, even from the sensory side. Then when you go to the context layer, only when you have enough information from the sensors to meaningfully create context will you even know how to make this technology work. Of course, the intelligence layer is there. AI is advanced. It can do a lot of things. It can take your information. It can make inferences. But the memory layer is still being built, right? It's still in infancy stages. There's a lot to be done, and we can discuss more about it. So I think there is both this technology, also privacy and trust, and both of them have to move kind of hand in hand, and one is a blocker. If you don't have trust and privacy, I don't think we can even deploy them at large scale and problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are things that have, limited what we can do in product today. But again, that's our vision. And there's a lot of work to be done in the first couple evolutions that I talked about making super engaging explanations, making really awesome active learning experiences. And we always talk about, stringing together a long-term journey, if we don't have the single session right, is like putting the cart before the horse. So over the last couple of years, we've really focused on making these first interactions amazing. And as we do that, and as the technology improves, we'll be able to then string them together in a very personalized journey.
And Muktha, I really appreciate that layout of the 4 different layers. And I think just to kind of ask for our broader audience, right? Because we have not only builders, but also educators here. How should they think about the contextual layer and the memory layer and how they interact? I think people understand the sensory layer. They get, okay, there's sensors all over our cars. They can input it. We have these coming Fitbit. And the intelligence layer is where they get the most exposure through the LLMs. But can you talk about those other 2 layers a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, let me start with the memory layer, right? I mean, AI with a memory layer is like you learning from a teacher who knows you. So this teacher has been with you through the year. They've seen you take multiple tests. They've seen you ask questions in the class. They've seen where your misconceptions are, and they know how to relate to you. They know what your interests are. They can relate whatever they're going to say to your interests. The AI without memory is like talking to a stranger, like a stranger coming in out of the cold and teaching you something. They don't have the context of who you are, what you like, and all that. So it's a distinct difference between what the memory layer can provide in terms of teaching. And the context layer is important because it's very important. Like, I cannot teach people in the wild, right? The context matters. If I'm teaching somebody about like physics when they are studying for AP, or which I'm studying, like, let's say formal versus informal learning. If it's a formal environment, I'm in a class, the way I teach is different when it's an informal environment, when I'm asking them to do something and teaching in an informal way. That's one simple example of context. Also, other part of context is, am I studying for an AP bio exam, or is it just a regular test in my class? And those 2 are different contexts. So a lot of context is important for the AI to make the right decisions. Also, you have to pull in the right information from your memory to match the current context. And so today, sensors can give a lot of signals, but how do you synthesize them into a context? And that's something that's important. And I don't think it's readily available. What do you think, Rob, about that?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's readily available, but I do think that, like, when I think about ambient AI, the killer use case is hyper-personalization. Like, how do we create this like really detailed learner profile? And when I think about the learner profile, there's a couple of different components to it. And I think about personalization in general as inputs versus outputs. So the inputs are like, let's populate this learner profile with understanding, 1, what's the learner's goals? Like, what are they trying to achieve? 2, where are they today? Like, what's your current level of ability? 3, what's the learning context you're in? Are you using, a certain textbook, or what school are you in, or what curriculum are you using? And then 4 is a bit of a catch-all of like, what are your interests? What are your learning preferences? What are any constraints that you may have? And so with that, you can create a really interesting learning profile. Now with that, you can do a lot of interesting things on the output side for personalization. You can create a very unique learning path, because I know your starting point and I know where you're going. So I can create we call it a curriculum for one, something that's only unique to me, where I'm only learning things I need to know and nothing else. And then we can also adapt how you go along that path. If I'm learning quickly, I can shrink certain parts. If you're going a little slower, I can extend that part. So really keeping you in that zone of proximal development. We can also personalize that path to meet, your preferences, tie it to your interests or your surroundings to make it much more relevant to you. And then finally, one thing that's also exciting is when you have all that context, you can also be much more proactive. It's not just like waiting for me to come to the app and ask a question. It's like, hey, Rob, you have this big exam coming up. You're not ready. Let's get going. Let's put the nose to the grindstone. And so I think there's like this context layer and then the intelligence layer on top of it is super powerful when it comes to personalization. That being said, there's a lot of things we can capture even today that can start filling that in. Like, again, if you look at chat history, if you look at how people interact, you can probably infer, what level they are. And as they answer questions, you also get a sense as to what their level of ability is. What Ambient AI is really exciting is you just take all that cost of putting that context in and you make it frictionless, right? Like right now when I use AI, my biggest problem is making sure it has the context to give me good advice, right? I have to upload documents, I have to link things, I have to type in the prompt and the context. In a world where AI always sees what you see, it hears what you hear, it's connected to your drive and your files and your calendar, that all comes for free. And it just happens to just do the right thing with all the right information. So I don't think it's like personalization on or off or ambient AI on or off. It is a progression of as we get more capabilities, we can build a richer and richer profile to do more and more powerful personalization.
And Rob, I love the things that you brought up around what true personalization looks like, because we've seen a lot of different AI tutors, and some of my biggest angst are with how personalization it is often seen as this very superficial, let's personalize this story to be dogs versus cats. And it's like, there's so many layers to personalization. And it's not just about this very superficial layer of just changing the content. But beyond that, I think also when we've been pitched AI tutors, it's, all of them have been single turn conversations. And now you have this opportunity to really build that continuous layer. I guess on more like a technical and logistics front, when you think about all the different inputs that you can take, I'm just thinking, for example, now we have all this browser data and I am going through thousands of websites, but there are certain things that I think are probably meaningful for my learning journey and can be helpful for inferring where I am skill level wise. But then there's a lot of other stuff that is just like random rabbit holes I'm going down or totally irrelevant. And I've had conversations with other people, in K-12 where it's like, if you're having a personal issue at home, do you want that to be surfaced in your learning content? So I'm curious about how you actually manage all this input of data around a learner, and how do you categorize what's helpful, what's not helpful? How do you think about all of that?
I can say a little bit from a technical perspective, and maybe Rob, you can go more into a user perspective. I think this relates to how you structure the memory and what goes into the memory and what doesn't go into a memory. Part of the challenge is in memory is how do you structure what goes into a memory? And I could say that let's think about what the human brain does. Like human brain has a lot of semantic memory. Like let's say, I'll say a student wants to graduate with an A in AP Calc. It's very straightforward. It's their goal. It's a fact that I can store in memory, or I can say the student is fluent in Mandarin. Then there is also episodic memory, which says that it has timestamps on it. For example, you would say last week the student studied limits in Calc AB, and you want to be able to store that with time and with some idea of what it means for that time to expire. Like maybe 3 weeks from now, this may not be relevant, or maybe next year it won't be relevant, but there is a expiry on it. And then there is like a belief memory. Like I think the student has a 4 out of 4 proficiency when it comes to learning limits in AB Calc. And you could say I have 90% confidence in this, but then I'm only 10% confident that they know how to do differentiation. So how do you store those beliefs, and how do you update those beliefs as new information comes in? Like if they do a new test and they did very well in it, you want to update that information. So it's all about creating, like a lot of these problems have been addressed as far as knowledge graph building is concerned. So if you go look at the knowledge graph community, a lot of this work has been done over the years. I think we need to borrow from there. And updating the beliefs as new data comes in is very important. And finally, of course, preference data. And a big part of this is what is relevant versus what is not relevant. And for that, we need a kind of a classifier that can look at the data and say, is this relevant to any of the parts of the knowledge graph? And if it is relevant, is it important information to update any belief that we already have? If not, how do you throw it away, right? Or will it be important in the future? I don't know. These are all important things that I don't think many of them have been solved. Updating the beliefs in a knowledge graph has been, a lot of work has been done. How do you store irrelevant information in case it becomes relevant in the future? That's a very important question. Hasn't been solved. So there are multiple problems associated with it. And in addition to that, there is also this question of, from millions of information that is stored in the past, how do I find what is relevant to this current context, right? And can I load, how much can I load into a context window of an existing LLM so that it can understand it without overloading it? That's important. So I think there is some technology, some work that's being done in terms of how do you embed this information into a graph? How do you store it? And right now I'm going deeper into some technology aspects. For example, you can store this as a knowledge graph, which is structured information. And then you can also store it as unstructured information. Knowledge graph can only say, I like sushi, but as unstructured information can say, I like sushi when I am in Japan, like when I'm traveling in Tokyo. And that's a very different contextual information. So how you store it also matters. I think LLMs are a little better in updating unstructured text with context written into it. But structured text, it's not that, structured content, it's not that easy to update. So the question you ask is a tough question. It all depends on how you implement the technology internally.
Yeah, I mean, I also think about it in terms of the learner profile and what we think will help make the best learning journey. So again, it comes down to like, what's their goals? Where are they today? And from that, and Muktha's had some pretty cool demos where it dynamically creates a knowledge graph. That's not like a standard one, but it's like, hey, based on what you told us, here's like a dynamic knowledge graph. And then we're going to update that over time as you progress along it. And so that was really exciting. And then also, understand, like, gathering information about your learning context, like where are you learning? What textbooks are you using? What's surrounding that learning environment? And then again, preferences, constraints, interests. Now, as you start getting further from that, maybe it's useful, but it's also less likely to be relevant. And so that's where that intelligence layer will figure out when do you actually write to memory and store it versus not. But again, I would always think about like those core learning profile components and making sure that as we gather signals, when and when not to inform and update that to be able to do those interesting personalization outputs.
I want to go back a little bit to a couple points that you guys have touched upon, which was one, Rob, I like your description of ambient AI is like frictionless, right? Like frictionless collection of data. And then Muktha, you pointed out, look, in order to have that, we have to have trust. We have to have trust around the collection and of that information, the handling of that information, the sharing of that information. We touched about this a little bit on our entire first thing was about trust in AI, but I would love to hear your guys' opinions on how do you think we foster that level of trust that people become comfortable with the frictionless adoption?
I can start and then Rob can add. I think, like you said, trust is the single most important thing in this entire system. And the value proposition, collapses when it starts becoming creepy or you don't know what is happening. And in my mind, I think the three main principles are transparency, control, and user value proposition. Are those three things very clear? One thing is, I know ambient AI, sometimes we say it should be like AI disappears into the background and you don't get to see it. Maybe that's not, I'm not sure if that is the 100% right thing to do. Maybe the user has to be aware and the user needs to be reminded that, hey, I'm collecting data about you, right? So, and they need to know what data is being collected, and they are kind of aware at all times that data is being collected. If someone is wearing glasses, you need to know, like with AI on them, you need to know that there is a light that indicates that data is being collected. So I think transparency is super critical. Second is, can the user control some part of what is stored about them, right? And like in search, for example, we allow people to look at their search history, what is stored about them, and delete certain things and let them store certain things. If you derive some information about them, there is reasonable belief that they should know what is the derived information about them. So I think having that kind of control in some way, and I know associated with this control comes overload of information. How does the user get to know everything that there is? That is definitely a problem to be solved. And the third part is there is a clear value exchange. They can say that I know I get this in return, and I know under what circumstances this is being used. So that you don't have any shadow profiles, that you don't know what is being stored about you and you don't know what it's used for. As long as we have these three, maybe there are more principles that.
No, I mean, I think those are the ones that I think about too. On the user value, when we talk to students about personalization and getting the data, I think they always think about like, what's the benefit versus the collection of that. And for the most part, they are excited about leaning into the personalization and the collection of data. But again, that comes with the transparency and control. And so I think they're always going to think about the cost benefit, and then, you know, making sure that if they feel like that cost benefit's no longer in their benefit, that they can then go in and edit it as needed.
Yeah, I like that very simple. It's always helpful to have things set in threes, right? Brain aligns towards it. And I think that it's great. Like you say, transparency, control, and understanding value.
Now, one other thing that is interesting is the other thing is when we talk to students, a lot of students don't like to use, if the school gives them a AI account, there is definitely worry about like, I'll still use my personal account. And I think as ambient AI becomes more of a thing, I think this like big brother idea of like, oh, my teacher or my admin can see everything I do. I think that becomes more of a concern. If I was a student, I'd be worried about that. Or I guess as an employer, I should be worried about that too. Or as an employee, I should think about that too. But yeah, I think there, as we collect more data, and as someone's ability to sift through that data with AI makes it a lot more efficient, I think some of these concerns are going to start becoming more and more critical to think about.
I love what Rob said. That's one point that was missing in what we said before. The user should know who is going to see this data under what circumstances. And clearly a student will behave differently, will be more free and open in asking questions when they know that a teacher is not going to be watching. Because learning is inherently a process that happens on the edge of knowledge, right? So a student should be able to explore ideas without having the fear that someone's going to judge them based on what they searched or what they are looking for. And so it's important for them to know who's going to look at what, when.
Yeah, totally. Claire, I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions coming in from the audience, if that sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. I still have so many. I personally have so many questions. And this conversation has been so helpful in just how I even think about memory and context and implementing it. But I guess to go to the audience Q&A, and if you're in the audience, please feel free to continue submitting questions. We did have a couple questions. I'll start with one super high level one, which is there is so much happening and so fast. How do you even begin to sift out what is useful and what could just be going down a rabbit hole?
I'm going to go back to what Rob said. I think he said very well. If you understand the student's goals and only collect information that goes towards their goals, that seems like a great place to start.
Goals and their current ability. And from like that, you can really figure out how they're progressing along their journey.
Exactly. And in that, I think one of the key missing parts of like what we are trying to build into the model itself is the ability to be pedagogical and incorporate learning science. And maybe that is also missing from the memory part of it. The memory also needs to understand, it looks at every student interaction, but if it understands like what the student knows, what is their zone of proximal development, how to scaffold what on top of what they already know, what is their intrinsic motivation, then it can store only things that are relevant to what the student wants and not store things that are not relevant. And of course, we have to serve not just the studying part, but the student life also. I'm sure there are other aspects. And as we expand, we'll know what is relevant and what is not.
I guess as a follow-up to that, this also was one of my questions as we were discussing, all the different layers that you have to consider in truly building an ambient AI system. And it feels like there's a lot of people who need this kind of, if there was a world where you could just port this memory around different ed tech applications, that would be a dream, right? And it feels like right now a lot of people are reinventing the wheel in various different ways, layering context, different levels of context, different sensory inputs, different memory, and it's all not speaking to each other. And I'm curious, especially for the builders and founders in our audience, people who are hoping to build impactful education tools, like, is there stuff that is out there that is all available to take off the shelf? Is there are you all seeing any infrastructure kind of being built around memory or context?
I think this is like, let me compare education to health, right? It's so difficult for us to come, like in health, we've tried for such a long time to find that single database where everything is stored, where everybody is super happy that everything is stored here and everybody has access. I think it all depends on the regulation, who can store what and who can retrieve what. So I don't see a solution that's easy, because in the end, I think it is the information about the student is the most valuable part, right? And those who collect it also have to respect what the student wants, and maybe also they don't want to share out with other people. Yeah. But I do see some work, like there is some work in Rice University. They got some NSF grant to build a platform where people can plug in the data that they have already collected, and anybody can query on the data anonymously and ask for insights from that data. And so maybe that is one solution.
And then another one, I think CZI just announced, I don't know if it's the official name, but I think about it as the Learning Commons that collects curriculum and other things. And while that's not user data, once you get some user signals, you can connect it to that. And that takes a lot of the work. Like it's not feasible for small startups to organize the world's curriculum and those types of resources. So that is a key building block. I haven't seen anything that does like data portability of your personal profile, because I'm sure there's a lot of data. I think even within Google, we're probably not great about collecting signals from YouTube and combining it with Gemini and combining it with search. And even if we did do that, we would have to get user consent and go through a whole bunch of regulatory and privacy loopholes around that. Not loopholes, just checks and balances around that. But yeah, I do think that there's some building blocks that are emerging, but that dream, that what you talked about, I haven't seen fully encompassed yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. So I think anyone in the audience, if you're building in this space, let us know. It's very needed. I guess moving on to another question, just around zooming out even beyond memory and ambient AI. There are a lot of questions around the divide between the readiness of elite schools and public and private institutions in adopting impactful AI strategy due to lack of resources to train faculty and students effectively. Are you all seeing any initiatives that help bridge this divide? And if so, what are they?
Well, I know Google has announced a lot of investments into AI education and job readiness. And so I think it comes into different forms of research versus education programs versus reskilling programs. And that's one way to do that. And then, a lot of the products that we work on, like there's a Google Classroom team that's working in the classroom. A lot of the products that we work on are direct to consumer. And so what we are trying to do is really lower the bar for anyone to work with AI. And again, if we can make our products, like our ultimate vision is a tutor for every learner and a TA for every teacher. And we tend to work on that first half, which is a tutor for every learner. And if you can open up Gemini or YouTube or search or, another Google product and have a tutor that understands you, that it helps you, that can teach it to you in the way that it clicks, I think that will help start to level the playing field. And so that's kind of our goal.
One thing I want to add to that is, I think gaining trust, like there is in general in education, that educators and administrators are very careful about deploying AI to their students. And I think part of this process would be to give AI tools to teachers for them to use and then for them to know what it can and cannot do, and for them to become comfortable with this. And a lot of, like, if you look at Google Classroom, there are the first thing we're doing is building tools for teachers. So they can use AI to make their lives better. Like, teachers are today one of the most overworked segments, like work 60 hours a week, and a majority of their time goes in creating quizzes, evaluating quizzes, grading. Only half their time is spent with the students themselves. So if we can enable and train teachers to use more AI tools to make their lives easier, and they know what it can and cannot do, then it kind of builds trust with the teachers and the educators and administrators for them to allow the students to use these tools more. And the second thing is, as you know, our work with LearnLM, and we also launched guided learning on Gemini, where it doesn't give away answers directly, but it guides the students through understanding the questions that they have asked. So as we build more of these tools, I think hopefully we'll have more students, like educators, being more free to allow students to use these tools.
Building off of that guiding aspect, one of the questions, and we get this a lot across most AI conversations, which is, how do you go from just guiding students to actually ensuring that they are going through the learning process and the friction that comes with the learning process? I think we talked a little bit about frictionless input of information, but then there's also the friction that actually happens in the learning experience. So how do you guys, or how should builders think about creating AI that still is developing learning, and maybe some of that metacognition skills?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a hot topic that we debate a lot. Like, if you think about a spectrum, on one end is like student efficiency, and on the other end is like the hardest productive struggle that you can think about. We have to figure out what that balance is. And one of the ways I think about it, at least, is I think students kind of go between different parts of that. Like, if it's 1 a.m. and they're getting their homework done, they are probably in a more of an efficiency mindset. But there are definitely times when they like the goals of the teacher and the student overlap, like on test prep and other things. So they know that they're going to have to take that test without having an AI there to help them. And so I think those areas are ones that we're definitely investing in. And then we're also providing things like guided learning and other features to drive that active learning component of it. And then separate from that, we also have a pedagogy team that works with us and is integrated in our product development process that gives us, we publish learning science principles that help us make sure that we're building products with the educator's view in mind and a pedagogy view in mind. And so we have a set of learning science principles. And then we're also just recently added a bunch of principles around 21st century skills, because we also want to make sure that we're preparing for people after their education academic career. And so that includes things like critical thinking, digital literacy, collaboration, and creativity.
One thing I want to add to that, we are working hard to add these learning science principles into the core model. So we want the core model itself to encourage active learning, to encourage metacognition, simulate curiosity, and stuff like that. But it's also important for people who are building the applications to actively keep these learning principles in mind and build them into the experience and measure for it, right? So, and of course, not if you can measure learning outcomes directly, that would be the best case scenario. In some cases, it's possible. In some cases, it's not. In cases where it's possible, measure the learning outcome. In other cases, measure the correlation between learning principles and learning outcomes. So that's what I would ask the developers to work on, app developers.
I also heard within that one the context layer, right? Like to your point earlier. So understanding the students and the learner's context, what time it is, what their state of mind is, what their learning objective is, can really understand whether or not you need to be pushing for that productive struggle or helping them with efficiency. So makes a lot of sense.
I guess on that note, we are coming up on time here. And I feel like I could, Rob, I could ask you so many questions. You all are just a wealth of knowledge around thinking about actually embedding all these learning principles and into these models, but also bring those at the application layer, and have been a big fan of all the different products that you all have been outputting on your team. Truly, you can tell that a lot of care and thought has gone into both of them, or not both, all of them. And so really appreciate all of you being on this conversation. I think what's exciting to me is that honestly, it feels like a lot of the technology to start empowering this ambient AI, we're getting there. To your point, Muktha, I don't think all of it is there, but it's exciting that hopefully a lot of the future edtech applications that we see will have much more multimodality, much more persistent memory, hopefully a more continuous, exciting, engaging learning journey, and not only exciting on the technical front, but used responsibly and built with trust of the user and student and educator in mind. So thank you both for your insights and leading the charge on all of this. And for everyone here, if you have any questions, feel free to still include them. This will be an ongoing conversation, and we have a bunch more webinars coming up on our other themes from the Learning and Earning Report. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.